Let's get a little intro going. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Conduit Cast. And this time it's just me and Kevin, and we're going to be talking about something interesting today. It's something that's been on my mind relating to the Xenoblade series, and it is how each game has its own central theme and message, and what we personally took away from it. Because I'll give you an example of how I kind of thought about this. I was writing this review kind of video about Xenoblade Chronicles 1, which will be out a little bit later on this week, and I was writing stuff about the game that I didn't even notice on my first playthrough of the game, because I recently completed a New Game Plus, and then that made me think about the other games, and I'm like, oh, I might have taken away this, while some other people might have taken away something else from the game. So yeah, that's gonna be a pretty interesting topic. What do you think about that?
Yes. So as an episode, our goal here is to get a little bit of a thematic overview for pretty much all the games, but I do want to I have a concrete idea in my mind of what I think the central theme of 2 and 3 is. But for me, 1 is a bit more liquid to me. It's a game that, much like Xenogears, which we're both playing through currently, it has just a lot of ideas all brought together.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are expanded upon in the later games. And I think
2 and 3 are more focused. While I also we'll get back to this when we talk about 3, but I think 3 takes sort of the Xenogears approach. It's very focused, but it takes things from 1, it takes things from 2 to kind of make it into the Xenoblade experience.
That's why I think 3 is the magnum opus, because it just it really takes all the best strengths of each game. But I think, when you talk about the theme of the story, there's definitely a lot of interpretations that different people have, and that's something that's really interesting to delve into, because even when an author or just anyone who worked on it, but Takahashi more specifically, if they say what the theme is, or if they talk about what the game meant to them, or what they were trying to say with the game, people can still interpret that in many different ways, and different cultures have different interpretations, and different translations have different interpretations. And so
it's interesting how you're playing Xenogears normally, with no ROM hack or anything. I'm playing it with a Perfect Works mod, which fixes some of the localization and translations. And it's funny.
Does it still have Saridari?
It does not have Saridari. It's interesting because I was listening to Resonant Arc, and they're like, what does Saridari mean? I don't know why Richard Honeyman did this. And I'm like, what? Whoa. I know about these jokey things because I'm listening to Resonant Arc. I know some of the stuff going on. I'm hearing your experience with it. But I'm not seeing that in the game. So, and you even see it in Xenoblade 2 and onwards, maybe some of the character names would have given a different meaning to not even the story, but the experience that you're going through. And it just has a little bit of a difference too.
All right, I have 2 points on that. So for those who don't know, Richard Honeywood was essentially the sole translator of Xenogears.
Everyone else dropped out. They're like, no.
It's such a crazy project because it's such a text-heavy game, and it was basically translated by one guy. Who is Australian. Pretty interesting. And that line specifically, it's a line where Faye is kind of overhearing a conversation that's happening between Sigurd and Satan. And then Bart comes over and he starts being loud, and Faye's like, "No, calm down, like they can't hear us." And then he says, "Sorry, Dari." But in Japanese, he's just saying "suman," which is just like he's just saying sorry in like a really casual way. He's just saying it twice.
And a lot of people initially thought, like, is that an Australian slang thing? But it doesn't seem to be.
It could be.
Yeah, it could be.
There's
I don't
a lot
know.
of crazy Australian slang.
Yeah. But yeah, the whole story of Richard Honeywood is very interesting, but it has a very inspiring ending to it because it like really shook up and drastically changed how Squaresoft did its localization moving forward. But we can talk about that in the Xenogears Disc 1 episode, which will eventually happen later on.
I do have something to say about Xenoblade 2's translation, because I don't have anything too concrete. Basically, a lot of the names were changed. And this is just something that didn't really occur to me at first. You know, playing the game, it feels like it ought to be that way. It doesn't feel like anything was changed as you're playing it, which I guess is like the best option. But then you look at some of the names, and I think what is Pyra called in Japanese?
It's a Homura. It's
Homura
and Hikari
or
Pyra and Mithra.
So yes, that is the thing. So Pyra and Homura, if you know, you know. They're both derivative of fire.
Yeah.
Like, you understand what that means. But Hikari means light.
Light,
because, I mean, Mithra is like, she's the light blade. She has, you know, light powers, ion, and all that. But Mithra, I don't know the etymology of the word, but it doesn't scream light to me. Mithra screams mythology and like gods and stuff. And even the Aegis is pretty interesting. So Aegis is
a holy grail.
Yes. Aegis is Zeus's shield. That's like what it's primarily known as in like our Western mythology. But in Japanese, the Aegis is called Seihai, which means Holy Grail.
Yeah.
So it's kind of different. Aegis is more known as like a weapon. It is a shield, but it's a weapon.
But still a divine weapon, which is still
it's just a little different interpretation. Like, the Holy Grail is not necessarily a weapon. It's just like an object or a symbol.
Yeah.
And I think that's just a really interesting way to interpret it, because, you know, if they translated it more exactly, which is, in my opinion, you know, that's not the purpose of translation.
Yeah.
So, like, it would be a lot weirder in English if they called Pyra and Mithra the Holy Grail.
Yeah.
You'd just be more confused. Like, why are they a grail?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I tried to look more into the etymology of the Japanese term to see if it was more less concrete than, like, because like grail is a cup. So, but the only translation I found is Holy Grail for Seihai.
Yeah, I think that's I don't want to get too tangential. There's two things I want to talk about with this real quick. One is when Malos sees that kind of like Holy Grail artifact, something like that, in Torn of the Golden Country, he is like, oh, this is what I am. I am this divine entity. I am the Aegis. And that's what like introduces that moniker of the Aegis in All Rest or something like that. I might be wrong. I have to go back and rewatch that cutscene. But that's where it kind of looks a little weird, because like he sees that Holy Grail and then he's like, oh, that's me. So that's one thing. Another thing about the translation of Xenoblade 2, before we move on to like Xenoblade 1 stuff, is in Japanese, blades have like straight up like Japanese names, I think. Whereas other like characters like Zeke and Morag and other characters have like their own kind of names, but the blades have names that are like traditional Japanese names. So what people have realized is Patroka, Akos, Mikhail, it's kind of spoiled that they are more than just normal people, that they are flesh eaters or blade eaters before you even know. Because if you like, oh, these blades or these characters have these kinds of names, these characters have these kinds of names, why do these characters have the names that these characters do? So it's kind of interesting. There's something like that which I have to look more into, but I think that's what it was. But yeah, interesting stuff.
Some of the
Xenoblade
names
2
seem a bit arbitrary to me, because like you take Poppy, she's originally called Hana, and I don't really see a significant difference in those names, but I suppose it is kind of the blade thing, where the blades were much more succinct in Japanese, whereas in English they just have like names from just, you know, every culture around, more of a melting pot.
I think it fits though. But anyways, that's our tangent on localization. But Xenoblade 1, let's talk about Xenoblade 1. This one is really fresh in my mind.
I have a question for you. Because you've very recently replayed it. So what was your, let's say, like, from what you remember, your initial thoughts on the themes of the story and what you got out of it for your first playthrough versus your newest playthrough?
Yes. So in my first playthrough, it was all about like, oh, Minato this, Minato that, change the future, change, and
the
like
true
a lot
Minato.
of people, not even that. It was just like Shulk can see the future, Shulk can change it. Like you can, if you feel like something's going to happen, you have control over your destiny, kind of like that. And I've noticed like a lot of people, when they first play the game, that's what they take, and that's like a valid, like very strong message to take from the game. But when I replayed it a second time, that ending of the game resonated with me so much more. It's like when, after Shulk sees Klaus's experiment, talks to Alvis, and he makes his decision, like Alvis is like, do you want to be the next god of Bionis? And Shulk's like, no, I don't really want to do this. And then they have this discussion with the party. They're like, none of us want to be gods. We want to just live in the present. We want to live together and enjoy every moment as it comes. And then that made me think about like how Shulk lives always anxious for what's to come. I need to change the future. I need to make sure this is okay. I need to make sure that this doesn't happen. This person doesn't get hurt. This person doesn't die. This. And then Egil is always living in the past. Why did Zanza do this? Why was Arglis taken over by this god? Why did Bionis have to start fighting Mechonis? And because of that, he is in this perpetual loop of like anger, resentment, sadness, and then he turns into like a tyrannical like guy. And it's like,
and I think
I've always seen like the two opposites.
Anger comes from as well. I think that, I mean, this is getting more into character stuff, but I think that Shulk is often mischaracterized as being like really angry, because he's angry at the beginning of the game. And then he chills out considerably.
I always jokingly call Shulk the angry nerd, and you see that early on. He just like
the angry Minato nerd. He's gonna take you back to the past.
He's
rewrite the future that sucks
minded.
ass. He's gonna rewrite the future that sucks ass.
With him, like, you see, even at the beginning of the game, Ryan takes the Minato, he's like, oh, and then it, like, scratches Fiora, but she doesn't get hurt, because, like, the Minato can't hurt Homs. And then Shulk immediately rushes to the Minato, he's like, Minato, what happened? And Fiora's like, what the hell, Shulk, like, I could have gotten hurt, like, why don't you care? And things like that made me be like, yo, what's up with this guy? And then you realize that it is the influence of Zanza. It is Zanza in his head, obsessing over that Minato, obsessing over the future, obsessing over what's to come. And once Shulk breaks away from that, like, I would say, like, you see Shulk's, like, really true self, Mechonis Core and onwards, where he's like, I can't listen to this voice in my head. I can't kill Egil. I need to, like, figure out, like, a middle ground here. And then after that, he's like, I was never in control over this. And then he's like, how can I, like, fix everything that's happened? Basically, the main message of Xenoblade 1, I realized, is presence. How do you live in the present and kind of balance your past and future? So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I think that's super interesting, and that you're kind of opening my mind to how Shulk's character changes throughout the game, because initially when you start it, you know, we have this whole explosive intro, you know, Fiora dies and like the city is completely ruined, and then Shulk is a very proactive protagonist. He's immediately like, we gotta go. But he's kind of vicious in this intro. He's like, I'm gonna kill the Mechon.
Yeah, like, you have his iconic line to Metalface, "I'll kill you."
Yeah,
like,
he says that so many times. So like half of what he says in the beginning of Xenoblade 1 is just, "I'll kill you," or it's just, "Fiora!"
Yeah, he says things like, "The Mechon will pay for what they've done," and then his other iconic line is to Metalface, "You will pay for what you've done to the Emperor and Fiora." So yeah.
So now I'm gonna draw a parallel. There's a lot of parallels that could be drawn, but I am going to, if you can see that big fat book on my
I see it
stand there, I'm gonna say that this is really reminding me of Frodo from the Lord of the Rings, because he's being controlled by Zanza, but the Monado is the symbol for Zanza, essentially. So while he's wielding the Monado, he is not of his own mind, and he is much more vicious and much more stuck on the path that he set for himself. And, you know, once he loses the Monado, once he meets Fiora again, then he realizes that there are other ways to solve these situations.
Yeah, because I don't know if you realized, and I realized this even in my first playthrough, when they see Fiora again in Prison Island, the story drastically changes. It's not even like, we need to find the Mechon, we need to find Fiora. Like, what is happening, and like, why are we even doing this kind of thing? Yeah.
I really loved how you lose. I don't remember when you lose the Monado. Is it when Zanza comes out of Shulk?
Yes, it's when Zanza comes out of Shulk. He, like, in my New Game Plus, I was using like all different kinds of weapon alts, but like I was using the Monado Rex the entire way through. But in the end,
you have to.
Zanza comes out of Shulk's body and he has the Monado 2. He's holding the Monado 2. And yeah, Shulk loses the Monado, and then Mikhail, who is Egil's father, kind of constructs like a artificial Monado for him.
Yes.
So
I think that is extremely important.
It's very important
to the themes of Xenoblade 1, because obviously he gets the true Monado in the end, and that is the symbol for him surpassing God, surpassing Zanza, and like reaching this, I don't know, post-theistic state of mind. Which is interesting because the cultures of, especially the culture of the Homs is kind of an atheistic culture. But it is very significant that you defeat Zanza with the Monado. It's made by Egil, correct?
It is made by Egil's father. So it is still Machina technology, but it's not a divine sword. It's not like a Monado. It's not like a
sword.
It's just a sword. It's just a big sword.
Yeah, it's made by the people you met along the way and the people you've helped up to this point. So it's much more significant. Yeah, it's much more significant that it is made by these connections that you've built up throughout the game.
You know, something else to add on to that is, I might be wrong, but by the end of the game, Zanza is not only wielding the Monado, but he's also wielding Mainet's Monado.
Yes.
So that power is also taken away from Fiora as well. Yeah. So that's very interesting, and that whole third Monado thing, like, I say this in my review, like a hint at my video coming up this week, but I say in there, like, I never like initially I was like, what is Alvis talking about when he means true Minato, true Minato? What is he going on about? And then it like hit me, like I later understood, like it's Shulk like coming to his senses and be like, hey, this is like my will to do what needs to be done. But then it didn't really click with me until I played Xenoblade 3 and we had our discussion with Jake in officially episode 1, but the second video on the channel. And Noah has like the same realization, like the Lucky 7 is his like will to break Ionios and break that endless now, and that is what a Minato is. It is like your extension of your will to do what must be done. And that's
that's kind of the thing that I think is really special about these games, is the ways that they can be interpreted. Because, I mean, Xenoblade 1 is about 14 years old at this point, so a lot of people our age played it like 14 years ago. So when you're a kid, you get a much more surface level viewing or like interpretation of a work. And I think these stories work both ways, because like as I get older, I tend to see things more and more conceptually.
Yeah.
But they work in both ways. Like the Lucky 7 works as a sword that's just like super powerful, can cut through origin metal. Like it's the coolest, best sword. But it's very significant that it cuts through the flame clocks, because it's literally breaking the cycle. It is a narrative device as much as it is a literal one.
Yeah, and with it being made out of origin metal, origin is like the arc towards the future. So it's like your literal future blade is cutting through like the enemy's like flame clock. It's very, like, if you think about it very literally, it's a very symbolic thing. And like I think that whole Sword of the End is like the most like Xenoblade thing ever, because initially when I saw that in the trailer, I was like, what the heck is this? Like, is this the next Minato or what is this? And then I realized it was called Sword of the End, and then I learned a bit more about it. I was like, what does this mean? With everything we know now, with all like the souls residing within that blade, it makes so much sense. That is like the most Xenoblade thing ever. But
so I have like maybe I'll go back to Xenoblade 1 and like my initial interpretation of it after, but just the idea that the themes are portrayed through even the swords alone. So like I'm getting a bit ahead of our discussion, but so Xenoblade 1, Shulk finds his true Minato. He wins with the manufactured Minato.
Yeah.
And then later on, he gets the Minato Rex, which is funnily, it's funny that it's called Rex, because that's, Rex from Xenoblade 2. But Rex means king in Latin, I believe. So I think that's the bigger reference. Obviously, it's fun to point out that Rex is, like, extremely significant to the point where Shulk's sword has his name in it.
Yeah. I think initially it was like Minato EX, and then the R came before for some reason. I don't even remember, but like I always thought it was funny it was called Minato Rex.
Yeah. So then you move on to Xenoblade 2. You have the Aegis. The Aegis being the symbol of, destructive power, but overall, throughout the story, love is what binds it to the world. The love that is between Rex and Pyra Mithra is what ultimately like gets them through their journey, and puts a stop to the violence, puts a stop to using the weapon as a weapon. And then in Xenoblade 3, at the end, Noah throws away the sword because he has no need for fighting anymore. I think it's just like it's such a perfect encapsulation of the overarching themes. But that's getting very heady and maybe even a bit ahead of like what we're trying to cover now, because there's just too much to cover.
No, I think with the series being called Xenoblade, the respective blades in each game have a very, very important like role to play within the stories, and like Alvis kind of being the extension of the Monado, guiding Shulk on his journey. Pyra and Mithra being like very intrinsic to the narrative of Xenoblade 2. Same with Malos as well. And Malos being very intrinsic and very important to the journey.
In 3, the Lucky Seven is Pyra, Mithra, and Fiora.
Yeah,
like,
who were very instrumental characters in their other games. Those two symbols
together. So like that is, you know, I said this before in like in the big lore dump discussion, but it's, you know, it's basically the two wives of the or the wives of the previous protagonist pushing the next protagonist forward.
Yeah, two very instrumental characters within their own journey. And one quick thing on Xenoblade 1 before we move on to 2, or if you have anything else to say about 1. In my replay, I appreciated Fiora so much more because it was it was around that time when that interview came out, and I like was playing this game with that in mind. I was like, Fiora's important, like let me keep more of an eye out for her, because everyone's like, oh, Fiora's just like whatever, she's just like Shulk's love interest or whatever, right? And like in terms of like presentation, dialogue, whatever, there might be some like simplicities in there, but that's just Xenoblade 1 in general. But that whole like there's some parts I like missed, and I'm like now understanding like Maineth wanted Fiora to be like her vessel. She wanted like Fiora specifically. She resonated with Fiora, and like that's what Vinaya says. She's like, you're the one who Maineth wanted, and you're the one who can like put us like actually eventually put a stop to this. So that's her being very instrumental to the story. And like I always saw that symbolism of like Zanza and Maineth as gods, but then Shulk and Fiora as like their Hom's extension. And like Maineth doesn't want like gods to continue to rule over for that long of a time. She's like, hey, this age is over. We need like these specific two people to be our like legacy. And that's just it's great how it's done in Xenoblade 1. It's very
on the next age.
Yeah.
I was thinking, since I haven't replayed Xenoblade 1 pretty much any capacity, but so I don't know if I have like a new interpretation. I have like pre-video and post-video. For the Xenoblade video, I rewatched cutscenes over and over and over. Just like writing about something gives you more. More to say about it. But when I first played through the game, I was taking a philosophy class at the time, and every single like chapter in the philosophy book that we read was a different concept. And Xenoblade 1 covered every single one of the concepts. So it was just like, it was almost a game about philosophy to me when I first played it. Especially, like, I really love how, in the end, every character, like, while the world is being basically rebooted by Alvis, every character has their own interpretation. Like, if you read into it, like, some people are more on the determinism side. I know Fiora is definitely, she basically talks about what is called libertarian free will, as in, like, there is completely unlimited possibilities and anything you do will change the future. Some people are more in the middle. I think Shulk kind of takes a soft determinist point of view. That makes sense given what he's seen and what he's done. And I think that reminds me of Dune a lot, because Dune has the visions and the idea that you can change certain things in the future, but you can't change others, which definitely happens to Shulk at certain points. And now I definitely see what you're saying as the central theme being like living in the present. I think I should, well, eventually I probably will replay the game, but I'll definitely keep that in mind and see how that changes my experience.
Yeah.
There's a lot of smaller themes that can be brought up throughout pretty much every game. The one that really gets me for Xenoblade 1 is the idea of the theology of it all, because the Homs are, like I said, kind of an atheistic society. I don't think they ever speak of religion or gods, just like when you're hanging out with the Homs.
Their kind of reverence to Bionis is all we see, because when Ryan and Shulker and Tephra Cave, they're like, oh, once you die, you return to the Bionis. So that concept is still there, but they don't remember Zanza, and that's what Zanza has an issue with. He's like, these
they don't
guys
necessarily
don't remember me.
Worship the Bionis.
Yeah, they don't. They just respect the earth and the environment, but they don't know the gods. They don't know like the deities who like have control over this, or I guess have control over them.
Yeah, and I also I think of Zanza as like a bit of a parasite. He's a bit of a false god, because he proclaims himself to be God, and he talks about like the creation of, well, I guess, you know, he comes from Klaus, and Klaus literally created the world. But Zanza doesn't necessarily have so much governing power over the world as it stands.
You know what Zanza reminds me of, and I like, this is just me understanding a little bit of what I'm experiencing in Xenogears. There's no spoilers or anything, but Zanza reminds me of what like a Gnostic demiurge sort of is, like a deity that is non-benevolent and is just kind of there as like a almost tyrannical force, which is that's all I'll say about like Xenogears stuff, but that's what Zanza sort of is. And it's interesting. I always found it interesting that Egil's face is called Yaldabaoth, but then also like Yaldabaoth is sort of the name of the demiurge in Gnosticism, but another like JRPG, Persona 5, you fight like the deity in that game who is actually literally Yaldabaoth. So
okay, so now I'm just thinking, so Yaldabaoth is the demiurge, and then Yahweh is just like the Christian god?
I think that is just like some kind of deity. I'm no expert on any of this. I need to like go back and look into this, but I just always saw Zanza as a non-benevolent deity. Yeah. And when I heard people talking about that stuff relating to Xenogears, I was like, that's Zanza, right? That's gotta be Zanza. That's gotta be how Zanza like came to be in Takashi's mind. Yeah, I do have to look more into this stuff. Like that's kind of like an addendum I'll put down. Yeah,
I feel like the research part of drawing these parallels and making these breakdowns is something that, I don't know, maybe I'll find my way to it in the future, but I like kind of the way I study philosophy and theology is basically just through games and through other people's analysis of games. But we'll see.
Yeah, I think we'll revisit a lot of this stuff in our Xenogears discussions as well. But anything else you want to say about Xenoblade 1, or do we want to move on to 2?
No, I think
I want to hear about...
There's definitely more to say, but I don't know if we can say it here.
I think we can move on to 2, because I think you have a lot to say on 2. I want to hear what you got to say, because I've taken a lot of stuff from 2. It's more of like personal stuff I've taken from 2, but there's still a lot of like actual like stuff in that game that is very like profound and nuanced and stuff. So I want to hear your thoughts on that.
Okay, so the reason why I find the writing process of my Xenoblade 2 video to be more difficult than some of the other videos I'm working on, or have worked on recently, is that it's a game that made such a profound impact on me and many others that I feel like I really need to do like proper justice to it.
Yeah.
Because it really, I don't know, it is a much more concise game. Despite it, well, my playthrough was a bit longer than 1. But, I mean, depending on how much side content you do at it, they might be like the same length. It's very succinct, and it's very focused on interpersonal relationships.
Yeah.
What I would consider to be the main theme in one word, I will always say the main theme of Xenoblade 2 is love. Mm-hmm. Because basically every single character has an intense relationship tie to another. Obviously, you have our favorite quadruple, I guess you'd call them, as in Rex, Nia, Pyra, and Mithra. But you also have Zeke and Pandoria. You have Mikhail and Petroka. You have Jin and Malos. This game is full of couples. As well. Laura and Jin, yes.
Jin, Mithra and Adam, Morag and Bridget.
Yes.
Yeah, so many, like, it is a very relationship-tied game. Even in the side quests, I haven't done a lot of the Blade quests, but you hear a lot about family in those. Like, I'm sure you did Vess's Blade quest at least, right?
I don't think I did any Blade quest, I'm gonna be honest.
I will give you a quick rundown of Vess's Blade quest, because that one really, like, hit me. Basically, there's this old man in Torgoth, and he's, like, a very, like... He's an older man, but he's done so much in his life. He's gone to so many places, and he has this blade who's like his caretaker, Vess, and she's always there looking after him. And then you do some side quests for him. He loves to eat chocolate, and he's always talking about his like kids who are like in Morardain or something. And it's just like he tells you all these stories about his life, his family, his kids, how Vess looked after the kids, and Vess grew up with the kids. And then one day, like, Vess just drops into her core crystal, and you're just like, holy shit, like, did it happen? And yeah, he actually passed away. But then when you resonate with Vess, it's so, like, impactful, because, like, when a blade comes out of the core crystal again, they don't remember the past driver. So I think you can find those kids and take Vess back to those kids, and they'll have stories to tell, but Vess may not remember. It's so it's different relationships, but in different ways. Maybe they're lovers, they're like family, they're best friends, they're companions for so long. And I think the coolest idea that one of the coolest ideas that Xenoblade 2 has is that once your driver dies, your blade can die too. But how do you keep your legacy? How do you keep that legacy going? How do people remember you in the future?
Yeah.
So,
I think that is a very important aspect. You have Jin, who is a flesh eater solely for the reason that he did not want to forget Laura. He did not want to let go of this life that he had. And he wanted to hold on to her as much as possible. And he even had his notebook. Like, he had his notebook that he wrote down all his memories in.
And Bridget does the same.
Bridget had her notebook, but she did lose her memories at some point.
Yeah, but even though she has that notebook, she looks into, like, her past with Hugo and all that. She's like, was I really this person? And she, like, asked Jin, she's like, Jin, what was I like back then? Like, who was I? And you're like, oh shit, like, it's so sad that blades have to live this way, and that's what fuels Jin's sorrow and his drive to change the world.
Yes. I do think that Jin is obviously, like, extremely central. Yeah. Jin is the idea of, like, the lost love, because he loved Laura. And her passing, it was pretty much it shifted his entire character to joining Malos. But I do find that Jin and Malus also have a loving relationship. Even like, no matter which way you want to interpret it, I think that I would say on the baseline they have a loving relationship, because Malus is a character that has, you know, no ties. He has no ties to anyone until he meets Jin. Before he meets Jin, he has no allies. He is simply this vehicle for destruction, like basically just answering to Amalthus this whole time, fulfilling his role as the Endbringer.
Yeah.
And the game really goes into how Amalthus influences Malus, and then how Jin and Rex's relationship to Malus changes him so slightly that you can see that he's not a villain. He's not evil inherently. He just has this role that he must fulfill. And I think Amalthus is the perfect antagonist for this game, because he has no love at all. He has
he
no
lost his
love
mother
in his heart
at such a young age, and he's like, if humanity is this cruel, then why form bonds? Why form relationships? Why form like any kind of meaningful like friendship or loving relationship if humanity can be this cruel?
Yes, his love, which is encapsulated by his mother, was stolen away from him. So when we see him in the main game, he is a character, a person completely absent of love. And that was put on to Malus for the longest time, until Malus meets Jin. And that's the big separation between Amalthus and Malus. And that's why he works as the penultimate boss in that game. And he is really like the villain figure. I feel like every single Xenoblade game has the villain figure, and then it has the more relatable antagonist. Eggle and Malus.
I see that as Jin as well, and like
of course.
Jin is relatable in a different way, and
I would say he's almost more relatable, because you play as him and stuff. Like,
Jin is like a protagonist in Torn of the Golden Country, so you do see his side of the story as well. I will say this about Malus: he is entirely corrupted and tainted by Amalthus's just like negative outlook on this world. And this is one thing I love so much about 2. 2 has very small, like subtle nuances with its music that like means so much. So here's something that like might kind of blow your mind. So Counterattack is like that main song whenever like you're fighting, right? And I always see it as Rex's song. And like another like theme which we can talk about later on with Xenoblade 2 is optimism, finding the light in a dark situation, in a dark world, finding that bright light, or like the light at the end of the tunnel, feeling that optimism. And that's what Counterattack feels like to me. It has like the ups and downs, and it's like you will be triumphant in the end no matter what happens. And it's like Rex and the party song, mostly Rex's song. And I love that specifically. Do you have more to say about the music stuff? I have something. I want to go into Nia. I'll say this real quick, but I want to know what you say about that later. But basically, Counterattack is like Rex's song. And you can hear some of that Counterattack melody in some other songs as well. A little bit in like Desolation, Contrition, but you hear it full on in the final boss theme. It's called After Despair and Hope. And you think about that title, After Despair and Hope. That's what Malus wanted. Like he's in like this state of despair his whole life, but like he hopes that one day he might have, or like he hoped that one day he might have like a future like Rex and Pyra did. And that melody in that final boss theme mirrors counterattack, and you're like, this is the antithesis of it. Like, whereas Rex is like, I will be triumphant, Malice is like, why wasn't I in this situation? I wish I was like this. Why am I in this role that I have been subjected as the Endbringer, as Amalthus's agent of destruction, kind of like that. And like Xenoblade 2's music, dude, like that's one thing that like few RPGs do, like calling back to like an important melody in there, and you're like, what is the parallel that I can...
I love when they do that.
That's basically the takeaway that I found from that like musical motif, but I was like, whoa.
Yeah. In Xenoblade, I love, absolutely adore when they brought back Brilliant Wings and what's the
Drifting
song
Soul
and Drifting Soul for Xenoblade 3 when you get Melia and Nia. Those like arrangements are just so phenomenal.
Yeah, because Drifting Soul was like a sorrowful song. It's like, who am I in this world? Like, I'm afraid to be who I am. And then now in Xenoblade 3 is like, yeah, this is me, this is Nia.
Yes, I think... Okay, so Drifting Soul, we have to just go... I wanted to mention Blinded by Light from Final Fantasy 13.
Oh, yeah.
Not that I've played those games, but I think that's a motif that's used throughout that trilogy, and it's a great song. But Drifting Soul is so important to the game overall because, well, like, what is the function of love? What does love do to you? It makes a person whole. It makes a person realize the sides, the pieces of themselves that they never knew or were repressing, and allows them to accept it in a way that they can become their true self and move on to the future with their life, you know, becoming the best version of them. And I think this goes for a lot of the characters in the game, but the quadruple is the most significant one because I think Nia is the fan favorite in that aspect, I think, because, you know, Nia hides herself. But granted, Mithra hides herself.
I initially thought Drifting Soul was about the Aegis. I thought it was Mithra's song, and
that's how I interpreted it.
And when she says, or when the lyrics say, "I'm lost in search of you," like when I first played the game, I was like, "Is that Pyra and Mithra's longing for a connection like Adam?" Because you hear about this Adam guy so much, and then when Azurta reminds Pyra of Adam, she like breaks down, and you're like, she wants that kind of connection, that relationship again. But it could be that, but it's also like very intrinsic to Nia as well.
Yes, I think that when the song first plays is in the battle with Akos and then Malos, where Van Damme dies, and it's like this really intense.
Mithra. That's what it's called.
Yeah, really intense, tragic moment, and that's I interpret it as this is Mithra's internal like thoughts, because she's not even in the battle initially, and then she gets awoken, and she is immediately angry and distraught that she is even alive and back, because she was repressing herself so much she did not want to face the world after what happens in Torn of the Golden Country. So she has this immense guilt that she's repressing, and this side of herself that she cannot accept without help, and Rex is that help. Nia as well. Nia is also completely repressing her true self as... Is she a flesh eater or a blade eater? I don't remember.
Nia's a flesh eater.
Okay.
Yeah, so she was originally a blade, and then she consumes her sister, who was her driver's daughter, and becomes a flesh eater.
Yes. So she is repressing this side of herself, and it's completely encapsulated in her design. She's wearing like a onesie with a hood. Like she's completely hiding herself. But then when she awakens as a blade, you know, she only awakens when it's at like the most pivotal moment after even after Rex has had his crisis of character.
But it's also when she overcomes that, not guilt, but she opens up to Rex. She's like, hey, this is like what happened in my past. This is not like exactly what happened, but it's kind of like a vague, like, here's a little bit about me you didn't know. And like you can tell, like in Elpis, she's like struggling, she's not feeling too good, and everyone's like, Nia, like, what's up? Like, talk to us about this. And she's kind of like forced to be like, yeah, here's a little bit about me that you may not have known. And that moment, like that dungeon, is also where Zeke opens up about his past with Pandoria. He's like, hey, I'm a Blade Eater, it's gonna be a little difficult for me. But then once you get to that part with the Phantasm, she's like, I can't hold this back anymore. I can't be so afraid of who I am, especially with everyone who's with me right now in this moment.
Yes. She realizes the support that she has, and she realizes that she is finally in a place where she can truly be herself. And that's why that reveal is so strong. And of course, it's coupled with the confession. Initially, Nia confessing to Rex, and then Rex confessing to everyone, apparently.
I love that moment. Unapologetically, unironically.
Favorite line. Favorite line in the game.
Yeah.
And I think that encapsulates the theme so well. I love you and all you guys.
Yeah.
Like, it's just...
It's Xenoblade 2 at its finest.
Is. Yeah. Rex is the beacon of love, and he does have his struggles, you know, because he lost his family at a very young age, but he has this strong sense of community from his village. You see this from the very beginning. He's working for his village. He's sending money back all the
time. Yeah.
And then when you get there, Pyra says something like, I want to have a family as big as Rex's, because his family is the whole village. And for some reason, people kind of clown on that line, because they take that line and then they just show the screenshot of
show the picture of the
graves of his parents, and it's really confusing to me, because it's like, I get that you're trying to make a joke here, but I don't see the humor in it, and I don't also just like, if that's how you're interpreting it, I don't know what to say. You're just you're not seeing what's all around you, because they're on the edge of the village. Everyone's behind them. That's the family she's referring to. Like, I don't know.
Xenoblade 2 has a lot to take away from it. There's one thing I wanted to ask you about before we move on to 3, and I can talk a little bit about X, because I'm still thinking about X. But anyways, I was talking to one of my friends sometime last year on his podcast about Xenoblade 2, because he had just recently beat it, and we were talking about how it explores the theme of nihilism. I just thought about this. I just remembered this. It is a game that really explores that concept of nihilistic tendencies and ideologies, and like you see that in different ways. You see it in Jin, who feels it in a very like depressing way. He's sad because so much was taken away from him,
and destructive as well.
Yeah, you see it in Malos, who has no direction. You see it in Amalthus, who is very just jaded and has a very negative outlook on reality in the world. And my friend was saying this, and initially I didn't get it, but the more I thought about it, I kind of did. You also see it in Rex a little bit, as someone who wants to change the world, but he initially has no idea of how he's going to do it. And that's why Nia's like, yo, this whole like Aegis, Elysium, World Tree thing, like, what are you on about? Like, are you sure about this? And throughout most of the game, Rex has no idea what he's doing, and then it finally hits him in chapter 6, or 7, end of chapter 6, start of chapter 7, when Pyra is taken away by Torna, and he's like, what am I even doing? I got us here, I got us this far, but it was all for nothing. And he sort of has some nihilistic tendencies there as well. But even in the beginning, as he just has this blind optimism, very blind positivity and optimism, and no direction of where to go. But then you see him at the end of the game. He has all the answers for everything. He has the answers for Jin. He has the answers for Malos and Amalthus, and to Klaus as well. And when Klaus sees that this guy has gone to the stage of life that he is, he's like, okay, I'm good. The conduit can fade into existence and I'll be all right.
Yeah.
So what do you think of that?
I think that's a very interesting thing about Rex's character, is that he finds something to live for throughout the game. He does not just put forth that like he doesn't have like an intrinsic tie to his own purpose in life from the very beginning. He also finds his purpose and finds his self through this journey, through the connections he makes with others. And in the end, after the trials, Klaus's trials are really hard on him, and they really push his relationships. And I think they show that those relationships are the most important part of him, because he cannot live without them.
Yeah.
And at the very end, when he only has Pyra and Mithra with him, and he just starts breaking down, I just think that it shows how Rex can be pushed into different places, and how his initial optimism has been challenged so much over the game, because it's a really hard journey. Like they get their shit rocked a lot.
Yeah, they lose so much, they learn so much. It's tough for them.
And ultimately he's able to like reach that higher maturity with the love that he's developed along the way.
Yeah.
So I think that, and you see it in Malos, and how Rex reacts to Malos, because Rex in the end understands that this could very well be him, given the absence of the love that he feels for everyone else. Yeah.
And same with Malos. Like, if he had a direction, if he had a purpose, if he had love, he could have been sort of like what Pyra and Mithra were to Rex. Yeah.
I think what's really important as well for Rex is his absence of any hatred for others, because you never see him, like, he gets mad, he fights and stuff, but
he always gives the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, he never necessarily demonizes anyone. And even at the very end, he references the Salvager Code, and he's like, you have a punch up, and then you go out and get some pints afterwards.
Yeah.
He doesn't see Malos as an evil figure.
Yeah. You see it in Chapter 4, like, that whole part in Chapter 4 where you're in Gormod and you're helping those kids out, and you, like, take them back to Argentum. I was like, what am I even doing here? And then you realize at the end, like, it's a very important character moment for Rex, because he's like, you're seeing all this, like, bad stuff happening in Allrest, and, like, most of the time it's just, like, not good. Like, you don't want this stuff to be happening. But how do other people react to it, and how does Rex react to it? Rex is like, hey, we can fix this, but how would I set you on a better path? Yeah.
Like, how far he goes to make a better life in a world that is literally dying. Like, the earth is sinking beneath your feet, and he still keeps going.
Yeah. So, before we move on to 3, I will say, like, a few small things about X, because I think many people in the comments know, like, if you have played X, it's not as story heavy, it's not as story focused. It has a lot of themes you can take away, it has a lot of stuff you can take away from it, but it's not like the other Klaus games. But the thing is, it does have some Perfect Works ties, which I'm now realizing, which it's kind of cool, but it's a very lore-heavy game. Lore-intensive, lore-heavy. It has the Takahashi concepts, but, like, storytelling direction, not as much sure about that. But I think a few things I've taken away from X are, it's, I wouldn't even say teamwork, but it's, like, living with each other in like a new kind of world, and like how do different people react to it. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like, I don't know how like other sci-fi movies do it, but like, you know how like humans are sent to like another colony, some humans exploit the system, some humans work together, some humans just don't care at all. You see that a lot in X. A lot of people are just really, really bad, corrupt people, and you're just like, why are you like this? Like, we got to work together in this like new place, in this new environment. You see it with the indigens and the Xenos, they call them the Xeno life forms, the new like alien species that they meet. Some people are very welcoming of them, some people are very discriminatory to them. A lot of that stuff going on as well. There is one more thing I was thinking about with X, which I can't think. Oh yeah, there's concepts of like, it does talk about a little bit of like the theology stuff, like where do we come from, who were we before, and how do other people see that in this grand kind of scope of the world. And when we may not see eye to eye, like if some people see us a different way, how does that like change the relationship we have with them? I'm being very vague because you haven't played it, and I'm also like still, I recently beat the game. I'm still kind of like thinking about it. It's a strange game, but it's good. It has a lot of lore, a lot of cool stuff. I'm really like still chewing in on it, but that's that.
It seems like there's a lot of clash of communities.
A lot of clash of communities. A lot of clash of communities within communities. Because you have like Blade within NLA. Blade is divided into so many different divisions. And there's like interpolitics happening within Blade. And then even outside of Blade, people are trying to exploit things within Blade who are not within Blade. And it's a very kind of interesting political system you got within New LA. It sort of reminds you of like the politics happening within the city of Xenoblade 3, but at even a bigger, more grander scale. Yeah, because these people have experience from Earth. They've taken technology, knowledge, resources from Earth, and building out a new colony here. How does that kind of clash with different ideals from different cultures, different worlds, different nations within Earth, and all that stuff? So yeah, it's cool, interesting stuff. But yeah, we can if our buddy Jake Dumb Zito is listening to this, he can confirm or deny or say some more stuff in the comments below. But yeah, anyways, we can move on to 3. 3 has so much stuff, and
3 is a huge game. I mean, in its totality, it's a huge game, but like even in the story, there's just like tons and tons to talk about.
Because 3 is its own thing, and then Future Redeemed is similar to the stuff.
I don't even know if we can get into Future Redeemed here. Like that might be too long.
Yeah, it might be too long, but I will just say Future Redeemed has its own kind of theme, and that is like legacy, which we talked about with 1, like Lucky 7, the Sword of the End. You're using knowledge and experience and legacy from the past to build a future ahead. Sometimes those people may not be there. Sometimes those people may not be physically present, but their power is within this symbolic sword, which you can use to carve a future.
I think that the theme is like perfectly encapsulated when Rex and Shulk give their life force to
Glimmer and Nicole.
Nicole and Glimmer, because they're quite literally passing the torch, and it's very significant that their children are in the party. It's a multi-generational party. It's very interesting.
It's great. And then Elvis is there as well as A.
Yes, yeah. The main theme that I take away from 3, without Future Redeemed, is freedom. Like, freedom to live the life that you want. Freedom to set out on your own path, not follow institutions, not be brought down by a society that thinks less of you or thinks nothing of you, and not being as a part of a swarm, as a part of a homogenous group that allows for no deviations in what is acceptable to be as a person.
Yeah, that's really a lot of what Ouroboros is. For me, yeah, freedom is one thing, and like, that's what the soldiers of Ionios don't have. They're restricted within that 10-year lifespan. All they can do is go out and fight. Like, I sometimes, I think a lot of people take that for granted. I sometimes ask people, like, imagine your life started at the age of 10, and you knew nothing before that. Your life started at the age of 10, ends at the age 20, and all you do is fight in a war. That's like... And it's very interesting how Xenoblade 3 is written and how the world building is formed around that concept. The way people talk, the way people interact, it's as if they like have never had any other kind of leisure activity, no kind of education, no kind of like familial bonds, no kind of parental figures. And once they start to figure those things out for themselves, they gain individuality. Like, I think, what's her name? Juniper's colony. They do this thing where they like do their own activities. Like, they start gardening. They start doing their own like kind of hobbies and activities.
So a lot of weed.
Yeah, and they start to gain like individuality. They're like, fighting and war isn't our only thing that we're going to do. And you see that in other hero quests. The interplay with Juniper's colony, Xion's colony, things like that. And then when you go into the city and you see like families, children, parents, and you realize that your 6 party members don't know what these simple things are that we as players like not only take for granted but have just known from the second that we were born. And it's so crazy how the game kind of molds this concept into every single thing within Ionios, because that's what Mobius has created in this world. It's crazy how it's done. It's done so well.
I love just, oh man, there's so much to talk about, but I love that scene where they get to the city and then like they go into the maternity ward, I guess, where the woman has just given birth, and like they see a baby for the first time. It's like it's such an interesting scene because it's like you're seeing these late teens, early 20s characters react to like seeing a infant for the first time. It's like,
which we have seen like so many times. Like we see babies in public, we see babies in our family, and then they're like, what is this like creature who's like,
what is this small person?
It's it's
like gelatinous mass. I remember probably 13 years ago now, when my little cousin was born, I remember feeling the back of his head, and I'm just like, it's so like squishy, it's like gelatinous, like he hasn't fully formed at all. That's kind of what that reminded me of, because like when you have like a birth in the family, you know, everyone wants to visit, see the baby, you know. We have all the traditions, baby showers, bridal showers, all that kind of stuff. I specifically love Tion's reaction to it, because he is such a big reaction. He just like starts laughing and stuff.
He's like, Senna, you gotta hold their finger. Oh my god. It's a very wholesome scene.
I don't even know where it comes from, but there's a line from Uni where she's like, "What about babies? You got any of those?"
It's basically with Gray's Ascension quest, when you find out Gray has a wife, and the first thing, like, Uni like doesn't understand the concept of like families and kids, and like babies are a new concept. So she's like, "Oh, you have a partner? Do you guys have babies? Oh!" And then Gray's like, "Shut up! Like I know what you're talking about, but like."
And so, okay, one thing that's really interesting is, so we see how the flame clocks and being in the soldier system suppresses many aspects of yourself. But even still, people have certain things. Noah felt very connected to his role as an Offseer and playing the flute. He even says it's his passion at the very beginning of the game, which I love. And we see people form bonds, we see people form camaraderie, even within the soldier system, but we only see it with certain characters. But one thing that's very particular, that the people in the system do not, they don't have a concept of sexuality.
Yeah.
But they literally don't have sexuality. Because
I think that's because you would think that like things would happen within the colonies, but like I think that's a Mobius thing, that Mobius is in charge of their education, their knowledge, everything that goes into their brain. Probably like more than just that. I think Mobius has a very strict control over what they can and cannot do. Yeah, and what they do and do not know. Yeah.
We see quite literally at the very beginning of the game, we have the bathhouse scene where we have this mixed gender bath, and it's completely fine. There's nothing. Totally, there's no hijinks. It's just completely fine. And then when they get their new clothes from Van Damme and the girls start changing, all the guys suddenly get embarrassed.
You know
and
why?
They've never felt that before because they just broke out of the system.
They broke out of the system. They're now Ouroboros. They have flame clocks. Yeah. That's why.
And the girls are just like, what are you doing? This is completely normal. And they're like, immediately, they're feeling these emotions they've never known before.
It's not a coming of age story, but it is, because they're kind of put into a situation they didn't know that they were going to be in, initially didn't want to be in, but now they're like, this is our purpose, this is what we have to do, this is like what we are meant to be doing. And I want to talk a little bit about the concept of Ouroboros and Mobius. Let me say what I've said in my notes. Did I say anything in my notes? Yeah.
He had some stuff that I didn't think of.
Yeah, so basically, we talked about the fragility of life a little bit, importance of life and legacy. The big thing for me, the more I thought about the game, this wasn't something I immediately picked up on immediately, but then because I wasn't like the biggest Mobius fan, I was like, oh, Mobius, whatever, it's fine. And then the more I started to appreciate Mobius, understand Mobius, like really like dig into what Mobius is, then I realized the whole like theme of Xenoblade 3 is growth versus stagnation, Ouroboros versus Mobius. Which path do you choose? Because you see in certain points in your life, you try so hard to do something, you fail. Do you change your approach to it? Do you change how you like go about doing it? Or do you keep trying and keep trying and keep trying? And then you get to that crossroads where N was. Do you take one path and continue a different way, or do you sit in stagnation and relish in your not necessarily failures, but like take the wrong approach to it? And you see so many people who have become Mobius. They've either failed, they haven't gotten what they wanted, they try so hard to achieve something but it doesn't work out, or they just don't want to be in the situation that they are put themselves or that they have been put in. And that's what turns them into Mobius. And that's something that like really resonated with me. And I think the line or the moment that really hit me when I like rewatched some of the cutscenes is when it's either Melly or Nia like at the end when Noah is to make his decision on what is going to be happening with Ionios, he's like, the worlds will have to split again eventually. They say, like, Noah, why are you wavering? Why haven't you made your decision yet? And they're like, take your time to, like, think upon this, because you could start another Endless now. And they said something very important. They said Mobius is within everyone. Mobius is an idea and a concept within every single person, and it, like, I don't know if they said something like it cannot be reversed or it cannot be, like, removed, but it is, like, when you think about it, like, those feelings of, like, stagnation, wanting to stay behind, wanting the old ways, wanting things to be the way they were, or even other Mobius tendencies are present within everyone. It is inevitable.
Yeah.
But the way you act upon them, the way you react to them, the way you kind of build yourself up to be a better person, that's what brings out the Ouroboros in you. And just for me, like, lately in my life, I've been applying that a bit more to my, like, life and mindset, because it's a very applicable kind of concept. And it's Xenoblade 3. It's great. What do you think about that?
I think that idea of stagnation it's very important to Xenoblade 3, but it is just such an intrinsic part of our lives and our cultures, because there's, like you said, it's in all of us. There's some kind of inclination to remain where you are, to stand still, to stay in your ways. But that is, in my opinion, one of the worst things that you can ever do, because the rejection of change, the rejection of improvement, the rejection of new ideas, new concepts, learning about other cultures, accepting new people into your life, I think you're just completely rejecting the human experience at that point.
And sometimes it can be, like, it can be nerve-wracking, it can be scary. Like, imagine, like, life doesn't work out in the way that you had initially expected, and you're being, like, pushed in different directions on what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to go, how you're supposed to do things. And it's initially, like, a little scary. You're like, I didn't expect to be put in this kind of situation. But then once you kind of try new things, go out of your comfort zone, it kind of, like, it leads to cooler things, meeting better people, cooler people, and just change and development. That's kind of where I see myself right now in life. But like, having played Xenoblade 3 before, I'm like, it's gonna be all right.
Yeah, I feel that, you know, we always see people stagnating, and it's scary to me, because either the idea that, obviously, it's like we talk about these characters becoming their true selves, or, you know, developing past this point, like basically where the story ends. But what we don't see, because the story ends, is that their development does not stop. And they do talk about this, like, they always, they are, development is not something that ends. They don't complete themselves as humans until basically their death. And we see people that are so stuck in their ways that they think that it's the only way to live life, or, like, this is how everything should be and it should never change. But I feel like change is one of the most important things about life. And they even mention it in the game. Noah has a little monologue at the very, very end, where he says that it's uncertain and we're gonna make mistakes and it's not gonna be easy, but it's what we have to do, because that is the way we must live our lives. And I think that it's one thing to believe that one way of life is best. And I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with having a conviction on how you want to live your life in general, but there are many things that you're gonna have to contend with that may not be a part of that plan that will ultimately make you a better person. Because as we can see throughout these games, like, no one is complete without their pain and their hardships, and of course their love and their joy. We see these characters grow up and become complete through all of these different experiences, and we see characters like N completely shut themselves out. They felt this pain, and they say no more. They say, like, this should the thing about N is he brings Mio back in order to basically live out his life with her forever, but it only ends up prolonging his suffering and probably makes him suffer much more. Because his idea of his happy life just simply cannot last forever. And that is brought up in the ending theme, Where You Belong, I believe it's called. How it's like the time we share together seems like forever, but it's not, and ultimately there are changes and hardships that are going to occur, and we have to be ready for that. And there's also an element of that song, it's a farewell, because it literally plays as the two worlds are splitting apart, but it's also hopeful in the way that they will meet again. But it has a level of uncertainty.
This goodbye is not the end until we meet again, something like that. But yeah, N is one of my favorite characters in Xenoblade, because you see what he goes through, you kind of like relate to it. You're like, if you fail this many times, like, you're going to feel this kind of like resentment, and like you, even though within the game, as you experience the game, you're like, oh, don't do this, you can kind of see why you took that path. But then it's very interesting in that scene when like Mio and M swap. Mio's like, hey, I saw M's memories. She like doesn't want you to be like this. She wants you to move forward and wants you to like forgive and forget and just like come to peace. So like people still want the best for him, and then even after, like, once they understand that Noah and Mio and everyone else wants the best for him, and that's eventually how they break through to him at the end. And like that whole like idea of Mobius is within everyone, it's so perfectly like encapsulated within Noah and N. And then in the end, N is within Noah. Like he kind of like merges and becomes one, and that's how like Noah has the final say. He's like, I will break Ionios. I want Origin to do this. And with the power of Ouroboros and Mobius within him, he kind of makes that decision.
Yeah, I think it's really significant that they accept him in the end, because even though N represents so much that our party opposes, he is still a version of Noah. Like, this is still the same person, just in a different life.
Yeah.
And it's important that Noah recognizes his ability to be wrong, and how he is just, he's not infallible at all. And he even says that at the end. He says that, like, there are mistakes, like, we're gonna make mistakes in the future, but we have to work to move past them and become better.
Yeah. Also, one quick like musical motif thing, that song, it's called Noah and N. It's basically, how I see it, is it's N kind of recalling his past and everything that kind of made him into Mobius, because it starts with the Mobius theme. He's like, this is me, this is who I am. Then it goes into the Ouroboros theme. He's like, this is who I once was, but I failed so many times and it didn't work. And then you don't get the normal Offseer theme, you get specifically the Agnian Offseer theme. And you hear that and you're like, all I'm fighting for is M, all I'm fighting for is Mio, but is that what she really wants? Is that song, that's one of my favorite songs in the entire game. I love it so much. And I'm kind of happy it was brought back in Future Redeemed, because you get a kind of different outlook on who N is. But yeah, good stuff.
All right, so I think that is pretty much where we can call it for this episode. Because
any other final things you can think of? I think we covered it all.
There is so much overarching throughout the whole series, and doing like a broader overview, I feel like we got a lot of good stuff down.
A lot. Yeah.
One thing that I'm actually interested in now is we could do whole episodes where, so we've nailed down the theme of each 3 games, but of course each theme is represented in every single game.
Yeah.
In some capacity. So we could do other videos of like how the theme of freedom relates to every single game. How the
you know what's
theme
cool?
of love.
I love that you say that, because in my Xenoblade 1 video, which I've referenced a few times, I talk about how Takahashi inadvertently, and I very specifically say inadvertently, sowed the seeds for Xenoblade 3. Because he didn't know Xenoblade 2 was going to happen. He didn't know that Xenoblade was a thing when he wrote the story, because it was called Minato. It wasn't even a Xeno game. But there are traces of Ouroboros. There are traces of Mobius within the story of Xenoblade 1. And it's just so mind-blowing going back to that game and being like, what? Like, this wasn't
like poetry,
intended.
It rhymes.
Yeah, it's poetry, yeah. And like... It wasn't intended, but it is still there, and I'm like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I think like the through line is incredible, and then like even in Xenogears, there's some things that happen. I'm like, this is some Xenoblade 3 shit.
Dude, I am noticing Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 within Xenogears.
Yeah.
Like, you'll get a little bit later on. Like, you may not have seen the 2 stuff yet, but you'll see it a little later on. Because like there's something that I saw like just this past week as I played. I was like, this is 2. This is like imagery from 2. It's crazy.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of where slight tangent offshoot thing. I dislike when people say that the Xenoblade games are a retelling of Xenogears, because I think that's vastly oversimplifying how the stories are structured, what they're trying to say, what they're pushing forward.
I will say, now that I'm understanding what Perfect Works really is, I, like, my idea of Perfect Works is not what I now understand it as. I understand what they're saying, but it's very like, Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 are Xenogears, but not the broader scope of Xenogears.
Like they explore very similar themes and concepts, but they do them vastly differently.
Yeah.
I think Takahashi is just very interested. We can clearly see his interest through his games.
Yeah.
We see the things and the themes that he gravitates towards the most. And we just see that throughout his games. I think that's it's the Takahashi hallmark. Is what people are talking about when they're saying that these games are retelling or reimagining. I think it all comes down to him. And I think that it's very important to note that Soria Saga is intrinsic to the development of every single one of these games and the writing of them.
Xenogears was, like, I wouldn't say majority her, but like a lot of Xenogears concepts is Soria Saga.
Yes, that is what I've heard as well. I feel like she gets less recognition, and I believe she is not necessarily credited for a lot of the games. I don't think she's credited on any Xenoblade games, as far as I know.
The thing is, what I know about Soria Saga
they're
is
literally married. They definitely talk about these things in their home life.
After the buyout from Nintendo, no, even like during the middle of Xenosaga development, I think she kind of backed off from Monolith Soft and started working more as like a freelance consultant, story writer, designer. I don't really know why, but like Xenogears, a lot of it is her. I think a lot of concepts within Xenosaga are also very much her. And Xenoblade, like, even though she may not be credited on the development team, like a lot of this stuff is definitely probably her as well. Like, Takahashi probably came on and was like, how do we make this like dynamic between these characters? And they just had a chat about it. And they 100%.
I think about how, you know, it's like the whole life imitating art thing, and how I never found the interview, but someone in like a tweet talked about an interview with Takahashi where he said that a lot of Xenoblade 3 was born out of his experience having kids. I don't even know if he has kids. But if he has kids, that makes a lot of sense for how that story plays out, and especially how Future Routine plays out.
Yeah, it's a very parental child legacy kind of game.
And it's the kind of idea that, you know, when you're as young as us and you have no concept of actually being a parent, it's something that doesn't come up in your mind. I think about this one quote from Troy Baker, where he talks about how he acted in the opening of The Last of Us, where he has to do this scene where Joel loses his daughter. And he talks about that, like, I could never do that again now that I have kids. Like, I could never do a scene like that again.
Yeah, they're, another example is, have you watched Breaking Bad?
I have watched some of it.
Okay, well, I won't spoil it, but there's a moment in Breaking Bad where Bryan Cranston has to sort of do something like that, and he's like, yeah, I can't do that again. Like, I just imagined my daughter in my mind, and I was like, oh, shit. Yeah. But yeah, that is... What was this? This was officially episode 3, but our 4th, like, podcast.
Okay, yeah. I forget how many episodes we've done.
Yeah, we've done 4. We've done the movie one, we've done the Takahashi interview, we've done Xenoblade 2 Definitive Edition, and now this one. So this is our official episode 3. But yeah, this is what we think each of the Xenoblade Chronicles games mean. What the meaning of each game is.
Our interpretation.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you guys.
Note that this is an interpretation. We're not saying that this is the be-all, end-all opinion. And we're not putting forth that this is exactly what Takahashi and Saga put on the page, because that is something we can never truly know for sure.
Yeah.
I think that's a beautiful thing about art, that you never truly know exactly what it's trying to say.
I say this in some of my videos going forward, but I'm like, I love how these games, each of these 3 games, and even the broader Xeno games, you take what you take from them. Like, I see people online who have many different takeaways and messages that they've taken away from these games versus other people who have similar, if not different. It's a very interesting kind of like story that's being told, and it's applicable in different ways. So yeah, you have any projects you want to talk about? You have in the works?
So common knowledge to, I guess, people who followed my stuff closely, but the Tales of Xillia review and analysis is fast approaching and might even be released by the time this comes out, or it's gonna come out like the next day or something.
Exciting.
So definitely youtube.com/brotagonist if you want to learn about one of the best JRPGs of the PS3 era, and probably the best Tales game from that entire series.
Yeah, which we might get remastered. We'll see.
Which is, like, leaked to get a remaster. I'm so excited about that.
And streams are back, right?
Yeah, streams are back. We're also playing Tales of Xillia currently.
Nice.
Doing Tales of Xillia basically until we finish it. So streams are every Thursday at around 7 p.m. EST. Hopefully weekly. If it's not weekly, I'll probably post about it on Twitter. But Nishant, what do you got coming out?
I have a video which I talked a little bit about earlier. It's a Xenoblade 1 like review retrospective kind of thing, but what I call it In Defense of Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. And I take some of the commonly criticized aspects of the game, and I'm like, hey, this is actually good. The characters are actually good. The story is actually good. The story is on par with the other games. It's on par with other Xeno games because of these concepts. And I go on a little bit of tangents about how it relates to other games in the series, and I talk about the ending for a very long time, but that's what I got in the works. It's coming out officially on Monday, so I'm excited for that. It was
probably a little before this then.
Huh? What?
Probably a little before this goes up.
Yeah, a little bit before this. Yeah, so it'll be up. You guys can find it on my channel, Niche Quick Pops.
Check that out right now.
Yeah, check it out right now.
/Niche Quick Pops.
Yeah, and then beyond that,
I'm very excited about that.
Oh yeah, it's gonna be fun.
My feelings about that game have changed a lot.
You know, my whole as I was editing the video, I present the video as one thing and then go into a completely different direction, and then by the end of it I come back and I'm like, yeah, this is what I talked about, but this is what I was trying to say, but here's what I have done. It's interesting, but yeah, I'm curious to see some of the responses.
Does it have live action segments?
Oh no, not as much. Okay. It's not like my Final Fantasy 9 or 7 videos. I don't know which video is going to have that next. We'll see. Whenever I finish Gears, I do want to make a video on it, but the thing is, that long Gears video, there's gonna be so much to talk about. I don't even know if I'll even have it out this year.
The thing is, Gears is gonna be a lot, but I think I can do Gears before Xenoblade 3 because I literally want to play the game again, and I want to make it the most in-depth video I've ever made. I'm never going to say that Xenoblade 3 is the next video because I am literally going to work on that video for a year before I actually release it.
I'm looking forward to that one. I'm also looking forward to your 2 video. That's gonna be fun.
The next one. That's been announced. That's dropping. I'm gonna stop announcing which videos I'm doing next because of my work ethic. But that one's coming after Zillia, and that's gonna be a whole big process. I really hope I do it justice. I'm confident, but I need to finish the script and really, make it the best it can be.
Yeah, and for Conduit Cast specifically, we will have some videos on Xenogears Disc 1, Disc 2, Perfect Works in the future. Once we both finish the game, we'll take our time with that, and before that, we might have some other discussion topics. I might also try to make some.
Have we been consistent on uploads? How consistent have we been on uploads?
We've been alright.
Yeah.
I think
basically except the same amount of consistency that we've been doing.
Yeah, what I was saying is I might try to clip some highlights, make some YouTube shorts, things like that, because we had some cool segments in our episode with Jake and
it looks like definitely. It looks like we've released an episode monthly pretty consistently. So I'd say you can expect new Conduit Cast episodes every month, around every month.
Yeah. But that is it for episode 3 of the Conduit Cast. Subscribe to Kevin the Protagonist, me, Niche Quick Pops, and our channel, the Conduit Cast, and we'll see you guys in the next one later.
Absolutely. Peace.